Hello and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining. We will start momentarily once all participants have joined. For those who are just joining, welcome and good afternoon. We will start momentarily. Once we see a lot of participants have joined, we will be starting in just a few moments. All right, I do see a few folks are still joining slowly in for today's session, but I would like to go ahead and get started and say good afternoon to everyone. Welcome to Magellan Federal's MFED Inform webinar series, where today we will discuss the important topic of food insecurity. For those who may be unfamiliar with Magellan Federal, we are a global team of dedicated individuals delivering sensitive and complex wellness services to our nation's fighting forces, federal civilian employees, and their families. Our expertise spans decades of supporting federal agencies with missions and programs that enable the next generation of healthcare. We are a division of Magellan Health, which is a part of Centene, a Fortune 50 healthcare company. Our employees are veterans, counselors, clinicians, and trainers that deliver health and productivity solutions for every phase of life. So food insecurity is something that we are familiar with and provide guidance on across our portfolio of programs. I'm Nikki Walker. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and the director of federal programs here at Magellan Federal. My area of expertise is business innovation, a special part of the organization that seeks opportunities to grow and enhance our program and think of innovative ways to serve our customers. But before we get started, I want to give a warm welcome to our co-facilitator for today, and that's Ms. Teresa Banner. She will introduce herself and cover a few preliminary housekeeping items, and then she'll move right into today's presentation. So welcome, Teresa. I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Nikki. Hello, everyone. I'm Teresa Banner, as Nikki mentioned. I'm a registered nurse and certified family life educator, a military spouse, and I've had the privilege of being part of a few different teams within Magellan Federal over the past few years to support service members and their families. I'm glad to be joining Nikki today and co-facilitating today's webinar. As we get started, we do have a couple of housekeeping items to share with the group. Please know that at the end of today's webinar, we'll be emailing participants a packet of information that will contain references to all of the resources that we discussed today, including tools that you can use in your everyday work. Also, we want to encourage everybody to use the Zoom Q&A feature to submit any questions that you have during our time together today. We'll be answering questions closer to the end of our time together. Now, on our next screen, let's begin our conversation today by answering this question. Why take time to discuss food insecurity? Magellan Federal responds to the needs of the military community with innovative programs developed to promote healthy living among service members and their families. Our mission is to enable this population to live healthier, more productive lives. As Nikki mentioned a few moments ago, Magellan Federal employees have developed comprehensive and compassionate support measures specifically geared to address food insecurity within this population. In today's webinar, we'd like to share some of these lessons learned about responding to food insecurity and provide guidance to professionals of all different backgrounds joining us in today's call as you support patients, clients, students, or even neighbors that you interact with on a daily basis that may be facing food insecurity. During our time together today, we'll see on the next screen, we'll begin by defining key terms, food security and food insecurity. Then we'll discuss common signs that help professionals recognize and identify potential food insecurity or hunger. Next, we'll explore some of the implications and common challenges that families face when experiencing food insecurity. The second half of this webinar is focused on providing today's public audience with information about Magellan Federal's core, C-O-R-E, core approach to responding to food insecurity. On the next slide, let's take a moment now to define food security and food insecurity. Where is the line to differentiate between the two? The United States Department of Agriculture, or USDA, defines food security as the ability of families to maintain reliable access to nutritious food to maintain an active, healthy life. Now, in contrast, on the next slide, we notice that food insecurity occurs when a family cannot afford access to nutritious meals on a consistent, reliable basis to maintain that active and healthy lifestyle. Families who experience food insecurity may not know where their next meal will come from. Parents or guardians in a family that experiences food insecurity may skip meals so that their children can eat, or may wonder if the groceries bought a few days ago will last until the next payday. Food insecurity is not a cookie cutter, one-size-fits-all experience. In fact, food insecurity falls on a spectrum of hunger. This slide here outlines a spectrum of hunger, which is developed by the USDA and describes categories of food insecurity, including identification of hunger, which results when food insecurity does not improve or is not addressed. We'll begin by identifying categories of food insecurity, the focus of today's presentation, which will appear on the screen in blue boxes. Low food security is present when individuals or families have access to a reduced quality, variety, or desirability in their regular diet. Very low food security, listed here in the bottom blue box, describes multiple indications of disrupted eating patterns or reduced food intake. For example, occasionally skipped meals. And it's very important that we take action to respond to either of these experiences, but especially seek to prioritize responding to very low food security to prevent the development of hunger. Hunger, we'll notice, will be discussed in the orange boxes that appear next on the screen. Hunger can have an even more serious impact on individuals and families. Severe food insecurity is a hunger experience that occurs when individuals or family members may not have a meal for days at a time. Malnutrition is the result of sustained inadequate nutrition, which has serious implications on mental and physical health and may contribute to the development of many very serious health concerns. As a nurse, I've observed that food insecurity is a challenge that both military and civilian families face in almost every community. Likely other professionals joining us in today's webinar would agree that this is an often silent challenge that families may feel shame or embarrassment about when discussing, which speaks to the need to approach these topics with empathy and compassion for those that we serve. On the next two slides, we'll explore common signs that may help alert professionals to the potential presence of food insecurity in both children and adults. Here, let's meet Eliza. Eliza is an 8-year-old third grade student whom teachers notice is falling asleep in school and has difficulty concentrating during instructional time. Eliza can't wait for lunchtime each day when she often skips ahead in line to eat as quickly as possible. After sitting down at the cafeteria table, Eliza's lunch tray is clear of food within 5 minutes, and she asks for second helpings on an almost daily basis. This seems particularly pronounced on the beginning of this school week, on Mondays and Tuesdays especially. During one birthday celebration for a fellow student, Eliza asked to keep the leftover treats in her backpack to save them for later. Eliza in this vignette is demonstrating several potential indicators that she and her family may be experiencing food insecurity. Social challenges, difficulty paying attention, hoarding food, and rushing through meal times are examples of some indicators that may alert professionals to the presence of potential food insecurity in children. Responding soon can help prevent the development of hunger. Next, let's meet Miguel. Miguel is a 28-year-old construction worker who just welcomed a new baby to the family with his spouse. Miguel complains to his coworkers of frequent fatigue. Miguel has mentioned that he's felt weak, and the construction site team leader has asked Miguel to take a break when he's looked pale and uneasy in order to prevent any safety incidents. Miguel hasn't smiled much lately, and though he shares pictures of his new baby with coworkers during lunch break, he doesn't seem to eat much, sometimes grabbing a single bag of chips from a vending machine nearby. Miguel, in this vignette, may be experiencing food insecurity, and adults will notice potential indicators of food insecurity or hunger may be found in physical appearance or complaints of symptoms like fatigue. In addition, mental health challenges like unmanaged stress or difficulty maintaining concentration could be potential indicators of food insecurity. However, we should mention that in addition to indicating potential food insecurity, all these signs could also be risk factors contributing to food insecurity. On the next slide, let's discuss how potential signs of hunger or food insecurity may be described as vague and could even be attributed to a variety of different health challenges or potential conditions. And in fact, it's not likely that the presence of one sign of food insecurity is a universally confirming positive indicator of the presence of low food security. Remember that the symptoms of potential health conditions should always be assessed by a licensed healthcare provider. But this is one of the reasons why maintaining a holistic approach when identifying and responding to food insecurity is a best practice that Magellan Federal team members have found is most beneficial. A holistic, whole person, whole family approach to responding to food insecurity is vital to ensuring that all psychosocial needs are addressed, remembering that different families will experience food insecurity in different ways. Key here is that professionals maintain an informed approach. Keeping in mind that food insecurity does not have a prescribed specific checklist of criteria that alerts everyone to its presence. Instead, it's often a challenge that goes unacknowledged and unrecognized. Prompt identification of food insecurity is key to prevent more serious health consequences connected with hunger and malnutrition. All right, now let's take a moment to explore why food insecurity occurs and discuss some contributing factors to food insecurity. And we'll be sharing a poll with everyone joining us today. In a moment, you'll see this poll up here, which asks you to select which items from a list you believe are contributing factors to food insecurity. And if we share that, okay, here's the poll. We should be able to see it now. It says, which of the following are contributing factors that place a family at greater risk for food insecurity? It's a select all that apply question. You can select as many as you like. Read through each of them: limited financial resources, unfamiliarity with resources, economic inflation, employment status, social support system, and education level. And you can click submit to share your results. It is totally anonymous. We won't be able to see who answered what. But Lindsay, if you could let us know when the majority of the group has responded.
We'll give it 5 more seconds. Get your answers in, please.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, if we can encourage everybody to make your selections, share your thoughts with the group. All right, let's see those results. Okay, fantastic. Thanks so much for sharing. It looks like across the board, almost all answers received over 90% selection. The 2 that received 80% marks, limited local social support system and lower levels of education. Great, thanks so much for sharing. I just wanted to review those results with everybody. It looks like the vast majority of us selected all of those options. We'll go ahead and close that view. Thank you so much for sharing. All right, now if on this screen here, we'll discuss those options available. Now, if you selected all of the options available in that poll, you're correct. Multiple experiences and challenges increase the likelihood of food insecurity. The Blue Star Family's 2020 Military Families Survey and the Magellan Food Insecurity Among Military Families report describe these factors, which will be listed in the screen in a moment, as contributing to the incidence of food insecurity. Limited financial resources, unfamiliarity with local and community resources, economic inflation, employment status, limited local social support system, and education status, and parents or adults in the family. All of those choices that we saw in the poll selection. Now, specific to the military community, we want to mention that contributing factors like the unfamiliarity with local resources and the presence of a limited local social support system are key because of the frequent relocations that military families often experience. Additionally, military spouse underemployment and unemployment are also correlated with a greater risk of food insecurity in military families. So thanks so much for participating in that poll. On the next screen, let's discuss the impact of food insecurity on the family system. Magellan Federal emphasizes a holistic approach that we've mentioned when providing support to military families because challenges like food insecurity have a significant impact, not just on one person, but the entire family system. Not only does food insecurity potentially impact physical and mental health of family members, but food insecurity, of course, increases stress on the family system. Because food insecurity is closely linked with a lack of financial resources, this is multifaceted. Families with limited resources in general are more likely to experience a greater level of stress. And we know that when stress increases, so does the potential for conflict within relationships. Specifically in our work at Magellan Federal in supporting military families, we seek to promptly recognize and respond to food insecurity to ensure that service members and their families can remain focused on maintaining readiness to support their mission. Now, at this time, I'm going to turn our webinar back over to Nikki Walker, co-facilitator, who will continue this discussion. Thanks so much, Nikki.
All right. Thanks so much, Teresa. I appreciate it. You've definitely laid the groundwork for us. There's been some questions in the Q&A that I've answered, and of course, continue everyone to use the Q&A to answer questions to ask questions that you may have. Well, as Teresa has laid the groundwork for us, we've discussed what food insecurity is, where it falls in the hunger spectrum, and how it impacts individuals and families. You may be thinking now, okay, I have this knowledge. How does it affect me? What am I to do with this information? And for some, food insecurity may be a newer concept. So you may be also thinking, how does my organization or my department get involved? And how would we address food insecurity for the clients that we serve? Ultimately, we want to level set. If you're asking who actually gets involved in food insecurity or who is responsible for addressing this issue, well, as teachers and nurses and doctors, program managers, directors, everyone on this call, ultimately, you are. You and I, we can all be involved in addressing food insecurity. So over the next few moments, we'll discuss how organizations and professionals like you and I are getting involved and what our approaches are for addressing food insecurity. So how are people getting involved? They're doing exactly what you're doing today. They're learning about this issue and what it looks like in everyday life. By obtaining accurate knowledge about food insecurity, you are able to correctly define what it is and then begin to understand how this issue directly affects the clients that you serve. Then, of course, a key component, one that we'll discuss further today, is to recognize any stigma or shame that is associated with experiencing food insecurity. These are the initial steps in getting involved in food insecurity work. Let's take a look at the next slide. Another way people are getting involved is adding the scope of food insecurity to their daily work processes. And this includes identifying ways to track the issue. Organizations are thinking through how to properly screen for food insecurity and if how they should report and document food insecurity should be a part of their processes. Now, screening and reporting makes food insecurity very real to you as the professional, and real to the client who is disclosing the information. How you choose to screen for and report food insecurity is an important decision because it influences how you engage your clients to get the information, how your organization will use the information, and how you will communicate to your clients about obtaining food insecurity resources. Finally, getting involved requires connecting your clients to food and assistance resources. In order to do that, you must be knowledgeable about the resources that are available. What resources are out there for your clients? What is available to them in their communities? Also, have a firm understanding about eligibility requirements. We'll talk about this a little more later in today's webinar. We never want to send clients to resources that they are not eligible for. Because there already is a stigma associated with seeking help, we want to make sure that when we do offer help, it's something that the client is eligible for. Also, be thinking through how to conduct discreet and private screening and referral processes or practices. This helps demonstrate respect and courtesy in what may be a difficult or even embarrassing experience for the client. And for our managers and directors at the organizational level, people are identifying community and government partnerships that form a support network around this issue. So now, seeing how people and organizations are getting involved in food insecurity work, what we've learned at Magellan Federal is that there is not one set approach. Teresa mentioned it's not a cookie cutter issue. So there is not a cookie cutter approach. And as Teresa mentioned, food insecurity is a social and economic issue that impacts the physical and mental health of individuals and, of course, families. It also affects the family unit, not just an individual person, a spouse or parent. So if you're thinking about this from an economic and social perspective, there are a few things to consider. From an economic perspective, the family's experience may be, hey, we don't have enough resources to meet the entire family's basic nutrition needs. And from a social perspective, it's about social things that are combined that affects the family's overall health, their living conditions, the income, the employment, education, all of those things are related. So if you think about an approach to food insecurity, it may vary by organization, depending upon the lens that you're looking through. If you're looking through it from a school lens, a social service program lens, or a hospital lens, you may have a different starting point on how you approach food insecurity. But remember, regardless, there is no one standard approach, and that is ultimately all right. But in knowing that there's no one standard approach, I would like to share with you what is key to today's webinar, and that's Magellan Federal's core approach to food insecurity. At our organization, we've been intentional in learning about food insecurity, understanding how it impacts our clients, and then figuring out the best approach for screening and reporting, and of course, identifying the best resource. Our approach truly supports the core of food security work. At Magellan Federal, our approach is we consider the complete family. You have to own your one shot, remove the stigma, and explore and execute the options. This is Magellan Federal's core approach to food insecurity. Let's walk through this approach together. The first thing is consider the entire family system. Food insecurity not only looks different between children and adults, parents and kids, it's also experienced differently. Children and adults may disclose different types of information about food insecurity. For example, children may report being hungry or that mom and dad use food stamps to pay for food. But adults, they may just say, you know, we're having some financial problems, having difficulties paying the bills. So it's important to look at the complete family system because it's experienced differently. Be sure to engage the entire family. Ultimately, you're assisting by identifying resources and supports for the complete family unit. Also, this next part of the core approach is one of my favorites. Own your one shot. At Magellan Federal, some of our services are short-term. It may not require a follow-up appointment. So clients may access services only one time. So there may be only one opportunity for you to help. This may be because the client is optional for them to follow up with you, or maybe it's because it's COVID-19, there's a prevention in not being able to have in-person care. Or maybe you're in an informal setting and it's a casual conversation. Or simply, there may just be a stigma associated with them seeking help. But just remember, this is your one shot. So be ready. Be ready for that one shot. How do you do that? You organize the process. What are the tasks from screening to referral? What is your process that you want to put in place? Make sure you have knowledge of that from beginning to end. You also want to steady your rapport. What do I mean by that? Because food insecurity is a sensitive matter for most families, you have to lead with respect and discretion. Rapport is quickly established when someone senses your respect for their circumstances and acknowledgement of their experience. Also, already know your resources. You're going to hear me say that a few times today. Know your resources ahead of time. This requires pre-planning and research for what's out there. Remember, this is your one shot. So you don't want to fumble the resource part of this. On the next slide, we'll talk a little bit more about food insecurity and the stigma associated with that. Ultimately, going back to the foundational concept that food insecurity is a social and economic dilemma. That may carry over to food insecurity having a social and economic stigma, which may prevent clients from seeking help. Clients may associate food insecurity with lack, poverty, or not simply being strong enough to be able to take care of themselves or their families, and this may cause embarrassment or even shame to seeking help. So ultimately, know your client population and the associated stigma. We've observed firsthand a family's reluctance to disclose information about accessing food. They don't want to be perceived as not being resilient or strong enough. As a result, they may not outright say, I don't have enough food. They may talk about, oh, I'm having difficulties with employment. Me and my spouse constantly bicker over money. Or again, we just don't have enough money to pay bills. So be listening for that, because there may be some associated stigma with just coming out and saying, I don't have enough food, or I don't have enough access to nutritious food. Now, this next piece of removing the stigma is really important. It's critical. It's ultimately about self-reflection and dispelling any myths and biases that you may have about your client's needs. Now, this may be a sensitive topic for some, but it is important. There's the other side to this coin. Not only is it important to understand how your clients perceive food insecurity, but how do you perceive food insecurity and the clients that seek your help? Our own biases can shape how we engage clients and how we offer support. So when we think about removing the stigma, there's also the responsibility of our own self-reflection and understanding if we have any bias against certain clients, groups, and families that come and seek services. As an example, I would like for you to take a look at this military family. At first glance, everyone's smiling. It's like a wonderful military family. What I would like for you to do, and this is just for yourself, you don't have to go into the chat or put anything in Q&A. I would like to know, what are your immediate thoughts about this military family's social or economic status, or even this family's access to food? Think about it for a moment. What are your thoughts about this family? Their social and economic status or access to food? You may be thinking, all right, there's 2 parents, 2 kids, that's pretty standard. Or maybe you're thinking, okay, this is a service member. Service members typically get free stuff. they get discounts, they have a lot of resources. Or maybe you're thinking they're military, they're set, they have enough money. Perhaps, I thought their housing is already paid for. Plus, there's a mom and a dad here. I'm sure they both work. Or maybe, you know, that military guy looks really resilient. I'm sure he and his family are doing all right. Well, earlier we talked about the impact of food insecurity on families. Think about your initial reactions to that family that you saw. Now let's take a look at some specific facts about food insecurity in military families. This is from the Blue Star Families Report in 2020. And this is a report that focuses on food insecurity and military families. First fact from this report, 14% of active duty family respondents to this report reported low or very low food insecurity. Military spouse unemployment rates exceeded 30% during COVID-19. 18% of military spouses lost their jobs or could not work because of COVID-19. If a spouse has not found employment, the family is twice as frequent to be food insecure. 6,500 military connected children were eligible for free and reduced price lunches in 2018-19 school year, and that's before COVID. And another point I would like to share, separate from this report, is that many military families don't qualify for SNAP benefits. We know them as food stamps, and that's due to their housing allowances. So some of those resources that most civilian populations are eligible for, our military families just may not be eligible for that particular benefit. I wanted to share this with you when we're talking about removing stigma. And I'm talking also about your own personal thoughts and biases, perhaps, about the families that you serve. This brings awareness that what we may believe about a certain family or client may not be accurate. If we naturally assume that the military family that we saw was doing all right, or that they're resilient enough to take care of themselves, we're actually reinforcing the stigma instead of removing it. So please keep that in mind in your work with food insecurity. All right, let's move forward. A few more notes about removing the stigma, because this is very important in food insecurity work and interactions with the client. We recommend using a more casual approach instead of formal or lengthy screening processes when it comes to identifying food insecurity. The casual approach simplifies screening processes by making it more conversational. The thought is to decrease any angst or embarrassment that may be associated with stigma in people seeking help. I want you to take a look at a few types of casual inquiry questions that we've compiled. The first type of casual inquiry focuses on running out of food. Notice, these are conversational. And because we're considering the entire family, we have included a question that is more relatable to a child. I won't have time to read through all of the questions in the interest of time, but please know all of the questions for casual inquiry will be included in your resource packet that we will send out. I recommend taking a look at these when you have the opportunity. So running out of food is a type of casual inquiry question. The next type of question is going without food. I'll read one for you. Going without food, that first question, have you recently had to skip a meal due to limited money or resources? The child question is, have you been hungry but didn't eat because there wasn't enough food? The next set of casual inquiry questions is about access to balanced meals. Here are these questions. I'll read the first one. Do you have to alter your meal selection or your nutrition based on food affordability? And the child question, more simplified way of asking is, what do you usually eat for breakfast or lunch or dinner? right? Again, the casual questions are more conversational as opposed to a formal line-by-line screening process. This really has helped in our work with our clients in being able to relieve the angst and have them open up about food insecurity. All right, on the next slide, thinking about casual questioning, also think about discretion. How are you asking the questions? Is it discreet? Of course, confidentiality and privacy practices are very important, but also in your discretion, be transparent about how the information is going to be used and shared, and acknowledge any concerns that the client has and share the ways you'll address their concerns. Finally, for removing the stigma, validate the client's experience through communication and education. You can do this by reframing food insecurity to be more of a primary or a larger issue related to job loss or employment. For example, you could say, well, thank you for sharing about your recent job loss. Let's take a look at some employment resources. You're meeting the client where they are. You're focused on the primary issue that they're presenting to you. Great communication there. Or maybe you're reframing by making food insecurity a more broader or universal issue than a personal issue about them. For example, it's not just you. So many people are experiencing food insecurity, especially with the pandemic. This is a larger issue. You could also reframe or communicate food insecurity by making it about someone's overall health or the family's overall health. For example, let's talk about everyone's health. Let's make that the focus. Let's make sure that you have all the nutritious foods that you need so that you can live healthy lives. And then finally, you could use the education approach by talking more about what food security is and access to nutritious food. For example, sharing with the client, food insecurity is twofold. It's not only just having food or access to food, it's access to nutritious food. Let's talk a little bit more about that. So you're validating the client's experience by communicating, meeting them where they are, and educating them more about food insecurity issues. We're at the last part of the core approach. And this is exploring and executing the options for your clients. We discussed resources earlier in today's webinar, but ultimately you're finding resources that address commonly presented issues, meaning you're finding the resources that are addressing the issues that most frequently your clients are presenting. What are the trends? What are the common needs? We found that food insecurity is not always the primary issue that's presented. That's key. Food insecurity is often a secondary issue. Clients typically present things like, a health problem, employment or unemployment problem. Maybe the family's new to the area and they're not knowledgeable about resources, or maybe there's a change in the family structure, new baby, recent death in the family. Remember, food insecurity is not always the primary issue that's presented. So be listening out for what are the common needs of the clients and what are the resources that I can tap into to address those needs. Of course, the next piece of that is when you find the resource, please make sure that the client that you're referring to are eligible for that resource. One of the most frustrating experiences is being referred to a resource that they're not eligible for. So take the extra time to call, to find out, does my client actually, are they eligible for this particular resource? And then of course, next, execute. This means actively participating in the resource process. Again, I'm a licensed clinical social worker. So when I think about referring clients, I'm always thinking about the warm handoff process. Seize opportunities to directly connect. Now, if that's not feasible, of course, make sure at least by minimum that you tell the client who they're connecting with and who will be able to assist them. And then if you can, follow up with your client and determine if the resource actually worked out. Finally, more on a macro scale or organizational scale, build program to program partnerships. It's important. Find out how you can network with organizations, programs that are also addressing food insecurity. Build those partnerships so that that really gives you an understanding of what's out there and how your clients fit into their service. Your local resources could be the community support programs, food banks, family service programs, military and veteran services. Be thinking about, okay, what are the partnerships that we can actually connect with or build in order to address food insecurity? All right. We have moved through Magellan Federal's core approach to food insecurity. I do hope that this was helpful for you. Just to recap, Magellan Federal's core approach is consider the complete family, own your one shot, remove the stigma, explore and execute the options. I do hope this overview of the core approach adds value to the work that you're doing and establishes direction for your own approach in working with people that you support in this issue. As we wrap up, I would like to share a video that summarizes all that we've discussed today. It provides a true statement or testament of the importance of the work in food insecurity. After the video, Teresa will rejoin us to conclude today's session. I will say it was a pleasure speaking with you today, and I will hand it over to Teresa and start the video. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name's Jo Higgins and I'm a data analytics manager at Magellan Federal for a program that supports our military service members and their families. I've been with this program for over 13 years, and I was a neonatal pediatric nurse for over 30. So I know firsthand how important it is to have a holistic approach when dealing with an individual. Because if a person has a problem, it's not just them that's affected, it's the entire family unit. It's often a brief moment that you may come across someone that has an expression or says something that alerts you that they might be in a time of need. That's true with our program. Sometimes we had that one shot to make a difference and pick up on that signal. We had that happen when a little child was very quiet, very isolated and sad. The counselor took a few minutes to chat with the child and found out that the family was going through a very difficult time, that the father had recently passed away. The counselor was able to get in touch with the mom and found out that not only did they need help with food assistance, but other financial resources as well as other services. When the counselor found this out, she hit the gas. She engaged the school counselor, the school social worker, and together they were able to link this family up with amazing resources like the local food bank, the church, the Salvation Army, and even something called the Community Holiday Assistance Program. They made this difficult time for this very large family a little easier during the holidays. We've all heard the stories about people losing their jobs or a spouse having to stay home to take care of the child, especially during COVID. What about all of the children that lost access to their school meal programs? There was a little 6-year-old who wasn't eating his food when one of our counselors went up to find out why. He said that since mommy had lost her job, he didn't like the food anymore, and he had just found out he may not have a birthday party this year. We know that one circumstance can change the trajectory of someone's entire life. That's why we here at Magellan Federal like to know that we can listen and help support our families by connecting them to the right resources. Never underestimate the kindness that people can show, but knowing the right sources, the right people at the right time can make all of the difference in someone's life. It can change between success and failure. So we thank you for taking the time to learn more about the food assistance issues and to know that you might be the right person at the right time during that one moment in somebody's life. Thank you for listening.
Thanks so much to our teammate, Jo Higgins, for sharing that wonderful video, and the stories that she shared with us are just fantastic and really go to show how important owning that one shot and being the right person at the right time could make all the difference in the lives of families that we serve. Now, as we close our webinar today, we want to encourage and challenge everyone joining us today to inject humanity into your daily work. In fact, the core approach to responding to food insecurity requires us to inject humanity into an otherwise clinical process. And by that, let me explain what we mean. Humanity informs our approach and decisions. My co-facilitator today, Nikki Walker, says that humanity is the undercurrent of our work, and I couldn't agree more. It's vital when establishing rapport with military families and connecting them with relevant resources that we tune into our humanity. When we think of our humanity, we become less biased and less desensitized to the needs of our clients, and we're empowered to listen more carefully to what they present as a problem. And our day-to-day work, it's easy to go through the motions, right? But when we think of the common human need to be healthy, to thrive, to be valued, to feel heard, we are more apt to approach food security with the humility necessary to help. And with that said, let's talk about what you can do next. On the next slide, we'll see that earlier in our time together today, we mentioned that virtually anyone can recognize and respond to food insecurity. We want to empower you, our audience who've joined us live today, or those who are joining us later by recording at another time, to take steps to identify and respond to food insecurity in your unique place of work, whatever setting that you serve within, whether that's a school, a clinic, or a military installation. Please download the packet that you'll receive soon, which includes information about Magellan Federal's core, C-O-R-E, core approach to responding to food insecurity, the casual inquiry questions, which Nikki just introduced us to, and our team uses to identify challenges related to low food security, and the assessment tools we've referenced available from the USDA. Our challenge is this: wherever you work or live, move forward with an informed and compassionate approach to supporting our patients, clients, students, and even neighbors who may be experiencing food insecurity by connecting them with the resources available in our communities for support. Thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate your time and participation. We'll move now into a time for questions and answers and checking into the Q&A the tool here for Q&A in our Zoom webinar. We do have one Q&A question I wanted to share with the group aloud. It was a really great question we received from someone named Catherine. Catherine says that she received a word from families that she supports who said that they were looking for formula, and perhaps, I'm surmising perhaps due to supply chain issues, due to their location, they were not able to locate the specific formula that they're looking for, that especially the formula that's approved for their WIC benefits, women, infants, and children benefits. And she wanted to know if we would qualify that as food insecurity based on the definition shared in today's webinar. Nikki, would you like to expand on that?
Thanks, Teresa. I think that would qualify as food insecurity. And because remember, food insecurity is access to nutritious foods. And so we would need to identify resources specific for that particular need. But yes, just to directly answer your question, for that baby, if there's a specific type of formula that is essential for their nutrition and their safety, of course, you would definitely qualify that as food insecurity. And I would recommend being able to work with that family in identifying the resources that fit that need. It may require some digging and some calling and identifying resources, but yes, that would qualify as food insecurity for that child.
Thanks so much, Nikki. I totally agree. I think that's an interesting take on food insecurity. And I anytime that access is disrupted, we could qualify that as food insecurity, absolutely. I think we can move forward. That's the only question that we had to share with the group. I think we can move forward now to our closing slide.
Before we did that, Teresa, I'm sorry. I did want to encourage everyone, if you did have additional questions, please use the Q&A feature for Zoom. The chat has been disabled, so you're not able to ask your questions in the chat feature, but definitely use the Q&A feature if you have any questions.
Sure, we can allow some time to see if any further questions arrive. Okay.
Go ahead, Teresa, just in case someone wanted to. Oh, here we have. All right.
Yeah, we did have one.
Come in.
Yeah, sure. I'll share it with the group. Sarah shares a question. I have several kids stating they have, they are not feeling comfortable eating in front of others. I have several kids saying they have food insecurity to describe not feeling comfortable eating in front of others. I'm not sure I understand the question. Nikki, do you think you could?
I have several kids stating that they have food insecurity to describe not feeling comfortable. All right, remember the key piece here is being able to educate on what food insecurity actually is, not being comfortable eating in front of others. Of course, that could be a different way from for a child to express some food insecurity if there isn't available food and it's not really an issue of being uncomfortable with eating in front of others. That's where you would want to use those casual inquiry questions and begin to ask follow-up to ensure, oh, is this to really confirm if this truly is food insecurity or if they truly are just embarrassed to eat in front of others. So use those casual inquiry questions to gather a little bit more information to whether or not this is food insecurity for that child. Any other questions, Teresa, that come in?
Not seeing any right now.
I did want to address, I did see a few questions about Deltec cost point. I know that's specific to Magellan Federal as far as how to code time. Please connect with your manager on how to code time for today's webinar. Okay. All right, Teresa, I think I'll hand it back over to you for the QR code.
Fantastic. Let's talk about the QR code that you can see now on the screen. We'd like to ask for a few moments of your time to collect feedback on this MFED Inform presentation. Please use your smart device or a cell phone, mobile phone on the screen to scan this QR code to visit a short 3-minute survey. We'd like to hear your thoughts about it. And we invite you to like and follow Magellan Federal on social media. Look for us on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. And finally, be sure to bookmark MFED Inform at mfed.info/inform for more live webinars, podcasts, and industry white papers. A quick thank you to the Magellan Federal Creative Team. And thanks again to everyone for joining us. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks.